Step right up and join the most vibrant circus community in the world, circustalk.com. This is In Center Ring. I'm your host, Jonathan Lee Iverson. She is the unstoppable force of nature, cultivated by an unrelenting faith. Endowed with a dazzling talent and a message of hope without limits, she empowers and captivates audiences around the world. In Center Ring presents Jen Bricker-Bauer.
You know, this is such an odd pairing we have because, you know, I'm 6'4" tall. I'm, all limbs. And I'm looking at your background and I'm looking over at my son and he's looking at me like, did you just see, like, you're like this multi-sport athlete and you're not just, they're going to let her participate. No, you're in there digging it in and you're great. And I'm looking at myself like, what a waste.
No.
I love your story. I mean, I know you must get exhausted from here. You're such an inspiration. How exhausting is that to hear all the time? You're such an inspiration.
Well, when I was younger, it was like really annoying. And then when I got older, I've like appreciated and I respected and a totally different perspective. So
I think it's so fascinating because your story does read like a Hollywood script. I know you've heard that 10,000 times. The fact that your mother really prayed you into her life.
Yeah.
You're the daughter of her heart. The fact that you couldn't say can't in your home. What was that like for you coming up in that home and really seeing yourself as whole, as opposed to what the rest of the world would see, but really being convinced in your own self, even that young, that you were whole?
Yeah, it was not even a question. It was not even like a skip a beat, anything. It was because it started, of course, with my family and how they treated me, right? So, and just, this is not my adopted daughter, or this is not our daughter with no legs, or, our disabled daughter. No, it was like, this is Jen. And Jen is super strong and has a mind of her own, and she's very strong-willed and determined, and she can do what she wants to do. We're like a really no excuses kind of family, and that's for everybody. That wasn't just for me. That was just the way they lived, and that's who they were. And so really, honestly, it was quite a miracle that they got me. It was through so many hoops they had to jump, and they were older than everybody. Like nowadays, people having kids in their 40s, it's like the norm. But not then, especially adopting kids in their 40s with already 3, 10, 12, and 14-year-old boys. They were like really, and they had no experience in fostering, no experience in adopting. So it was really a miracle from the beginning. And then the way they raised me was so, normal, whatever. Just not like you would maybe imagine, like a coddling or whatever. It was just not at all. And I always thought I was super cute and I loved being small, and because that's how they treated me. And then when I started going to school, I was just always so popular just because of, personality. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't have legs, or maybe you don't have you're not that good looking or whatever it is. But if you've got it's really how you are with yourself. I really believe that if I had kind of always gone around with this, this really feeling weird about myself, I'm going to guess anyone else who's around me is going to feel the same way. You know what I mean? Like, there's a much higher chance. Let's just put it that way. And so how my parents raised me in that environment where they really meant it. They really meant can't isn't part of your vocabulary. It wasn't like a cute saying. It was really the way we lived our lives. So the way we looked at life, obstacles or whatever, it was really just believing that whenever something came, an obstacle, that it was possible. I think just right there, that is everything. And I didn't realize I was being taught this like huge life stuff as a kid. And they are not scholarly, like super well educated, cream of the crop. They're like simple country folk, and who just happen to be spot on in life and character and morals and all the things that actually matter in life.
It's really a testament to all those corny things we hear. Your attitude does lead to your altitude. Faith, look, faith does matter. I mean, faith is as small as mustard seed, as they say. I mean, it does matter. It does work. There's something about the simplicity of your family life, that they would create an environment so enriched with this belief that they would actually cancel out an entire word from your vocabulary. I want to know, when did you know? When were you utterly convinced God had his hand on you?
I feel like it came in stages. I think I always knew God. I was raised in a home where God was really respected and put up on where he should be, And so my parents told me from like right out the gate, I knew I was adopted, and I knew that they said, listen, your biological family is from Romania. They grew up in communism. People like you who are born with a disability are basically like, viewed as outcast, completely outcast, or thrown in orphanages that are unimaginable, that you can't even imagine. And so they said, they probably did give you up because you didn't have legs, but like, also who cares? Like, you know what I mean? Like they said, the why doesn't matter because we prayed for you. You were our answered prayer. You were our miracle. We wanted you. And end of the day, bottom line, this is where you were supposed to be. Like you were supposed to be with us. So it really doesn't matter why they gave you up. And you also didn't walk in their shoes. You don't know what was going on in their life. And like, so it did a lot of things. Telling me that early was the best thing they could have done. Telling me in such detail, really explaining things like that, also gave me freedom to never have a chip on my shoulder about my biological parents, because they kind of just kicked it all out right there. They like nipped it in the butt immediately. And I never remember a time not knowing that I wasn't adopted. So I had to be very young when they told me. And so, and then they said, and it sounds so cliche, but like, they're like, God doesn't make mistakes. You were not an accident. Like you not having legs was not just like some, oops, like forgot those, it wasn't like that. And had they just said it, it might not have had so much weight, but they backed that up. So like they said it, but then throughout my life, through different examples, you could see that they meant that. Like, and they would fiercely fight for me, for my independence, for, everything to be normal or just like everybody else, that I wasn't getting special treatment. And there was a reason why, you know what I mean? So it was all of that, but the faith was the foundation. I mean, because if they said, God created you like this for a purpose, I guess as a kid, I believed it because they said it, but it was like, as soon as I started getting a little bit older, I started believing it for myself. And then I just started seeing like, whoa, this is, I said to my mom, this is not normal, but I said to my mom at 10 years old, I don't know what exactly God's plan is for me, but I know he has a huge plan for my future, and it will change the world. Like it will affect people all over the world. And I said it very matter of fact, very just boom. At 10 years old, like that's not normal, but sometimes you just know things. And that was one thing, like I just knew. And so I guess you could kind of say I've always seen God's hand in my life. I don't know.
From the mouth of babes. But surely, and I have to play Beelzebub's advocate for a little bit. But surely, come on, Jen, somewhere in your life, especially as a child, teenager, were there times where you did feel like this is just a burden you really didn't want? I mean, this just doesn't work for you.
Definitely not as a kid. So as a kid, I think I was really I think God really protected me where I grew up. I grew up in a very small town, and we all just knew each other, and it just was what it was. I was really never, I would say I was kind of in, yeah, I was in a really good place of where I lived, like an actual place, my community, teachers, school, all that. Like, it was so normal, like these conversations where I would have never even known to have a conversation about how amazing my life was, because it was just so normal for everybody. Like, this was not a thing until I started moving away to big cities and started being on TV and things like that. I mean, I was on TV as a kid, but I was so not in, like, I didn't get it. I was like, this is annoying. Y'all are stupid. I'm not inspirational. Okay, let's go. Let me just do my thing. I'm good. And so, but as I got older, I would say, I think it started being harder. So let me back up. As a kid, I had things that, like, you have as a normal teenager or as a normal girl. Like, I had acne, and I didn't like how my skin was, and I thought that I was really insecure about having muscular arms. That, I would say, that was my biggest huge, I mean, it sounds so simple to you, but for me, it was like the end of me. I mean,
well, I'm a guy, so I'm like, muscular arms.
I know. You're like, what? No, I want these. Must have. Yeah. No, it was so, I felt masculine. I didn't feel feminine. It was a really big mind thing for me. And because I used them all the time, I thought it was just because I didn't have legs and I was using them all the time, which is a natural assumption that everybody would think. But as I got older and I started really learning about the body and really getting into fitness and did my whole transformation and all that, I started and seeing other people who didn't have legs, by the way, who did not have muscles like I did. Then I started realizing that it was not actually, maybe a little bit because of not having legs, but the vast majority was more genetic, which fascinating, because typically women cannot keep muscle. It's like a man more, women usually very hard. But for me, I always had muscle ever since I was a kid, and I never lift weights, and everyone still thinks I do, even though I've leaned out and everything. And so, but later in life, it's such an advantage because as an aerialist, I don't have to touch the silks for 6 months and I'm fine. I just have to build some tolerance up. But I would say, as far as insecurities go, I had the normal ones, non-related to not having legs. The legs thing, even though everyone thinks that should and would be my biggest problem in life, I can assure you it was not. There were so many other things, but that never took precedence. And I think when I started traveling the world, it started to become everybody else's problem. So flying and airplanes and different cultures and different countries where people starting to say some real rude things, even if they didn't, most of the time, people who were saying it, they didn't realize how rude, and so you have to give people grace and stuff. Even though you're super annoyed, you still have to realize and be the bigger person, So I would say that's where the harder things started coming in. And that is when I started realizing how different everybody saw me.
I've often heard that from people who grew up, quote unquote, poor. And they'll say, I didn't know I was poor until somebody said so. They had everything they needed, and it wasn't until it was, they were compared to someone else that all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I really am this. Now, I love the story where you go to your mother and, you have this attraction to gymnastics. And of all people, your idol is who else?
I know.
I mean,
yeah.
She was kind of your icon, just instinctively. And you go to your mother, you're like, well, I want to tumble.
Yeah. So because we didn't have gymnastics, around, I grew up in such a small town, and so there was power tumbling. So she takes me to the coach, and I have so much respect to this day for my coach, Beth Allen, because she didn't just say, I've never trained somebody who has no legs. Obviously, you've never trained somebody who has no legs, But she just said, well, I've never done it, and I can't make you any promises, but yeah, I'll try. And that's it, man. That's all you ever need from somebody. And boom, she just trained me like everybody else, saw that I had natural talent, and then eventually asked me to be on the competitive team, which was like everybody's dream, everybody's goal. And you got to wear the leotards and the matching jumpsuits or windsuits, and all that stuff. And so that was just kind of like, it just took off. And that's where all the TV really started. So around like 9, 10, 11, 12, when I was competing all over the US, then I won a state championship in my division. Then I went to the Junior Olympics, and I was the first person ever with no legs to be doing this stuff, So it was really like, at the time, I didn't realize how big of a deal it was, because I was just doing something that I loved. And my mom, when all the TV things would come, and I even went to Germany and was on a huge TV show. I was in New York City. I was like, really, for a 12-year-old, like, that was insane, especially from nowhere, basically. So my mom said, because I was kind of like very annoyed, actually. And she'd be like, but Jen, you're doing this because if you can change one person, then all of it's worth it. And that's what she told me, like, that's why you do this. And I was like, okay, all right, like, I get that, and okay, so that's basically why I did that. And that's pure example of, like you said, when I go to my parents and it was them backing up what they had said. Mm-hmm. So I could have easily said, I want to go do power tumbling. And they could have easily said, you don't have legs. I don't know. I don't really know how you see that working out. And that would have been it. Can you imagine?
Right.
Can you imagine, like, how much impact we have on people's lives when with this kind of stuff? I mean, that could have changed, would have, my whole, everything, my whole life.
Right. And that story would have never gotten out there. You said something so powerful in one of your interviews that I snuck off and watched, where you made mention, and you said it so confidently. It wasn't like some canned thing. I was like, my gosh, she is really convinced of this. Like, when did you come to the reality that, you know what, this is for a purpose? This is my purpose. And you come to that place where you fully embrace it, and you wouldn't really want it any other way.
Yeah. I think I started getting the real, like, the heavy, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than myself realization when I was like 19, 20 area. When I moved from my small town to Orlando, I was working at Disney World in the beginning on an internship, and then ended up staying there for several years, living there. And actually, that's where my whole acrobatic and aerial career started. So a lot of stuff happened in that year. When I met my biological sisters, like, everything happened within 6 months. It was wild. And I started seeing, so at Disney World, people from all over the world come there, okay? And that's when I started, remember I said, started realizing how people saw me. Mm. So people from India, or people from Asia, or people from different parts of the world, I started to be able to learn how different places of the world viewed me. And sometimes very, very different, or how they would react, right? And so some people would come up and they would literally pat me on the back and be like, wow, it's so good that you have a job, that you're out in public working, and I'm like, don't say everything you want to say. Oh my, I was about to like rip them a new one, but I was like, me? Are we talking about me? Do you even, it's like you don't even know what to say, because they miss the boat so massively that you can't even remotely begin to explain how wrong they are. It doesn't do any good, right? So I was like, this was happening all the time. And then it was like, and then some people would come and they were so like, they would have tears and they were so overjoyed, but they're like, wow, you're so amazing. And I'm just like, what? I'm literally not even moving right now. I'm just like here. I don't even, okay, but like, wow. So these things started happening all the time. And it was like, okay, all right, there's something real big going on, And obviously it's really special to people that I don't have legs and that I'm just doing what I do. And I knew that I started to really see God, like, just kind of creeping, open the door slowly to, like, because it can be very overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, I don't have the luxury of going somewhere without everybody looking at me. So I wanted to make sure that's a responsibility. And I wanted to make sure that I did well with that responsibility. You know, everyone's going to look at you. You really should do good with that. You know what I mean? And it just requires to like far more refining of character, because when like I'm also very spicy, you know, and so it's not easy for me to just like swallow it and take it. I'm the opposite. Like I want to just fire back all the things and tell you what, and I'm good at it, which is the problem. So he really had to do a lot of work on, like a lot, and still working. But I would say that was, man, because I could see there was so much, like you were like kind of like I was kind of having to be the teacher just by default, right? And educate people, just not in like a self-righteous way, just like a normal way. And it was working on them and working on me at the same time. And then that's when the performing started, and then that was like another, you know, next 50 levels of total different of how it impacts people, you know.
You know, I'm curious to understand how, you know, you came to really figure out how your body works, because everybody is unique, and the body is such a marvelous thing anyway, you know. And I always have trouble with the word disabled anyway, because it's like like literally when I say you are so much more a superior athlete than I will ever be, that's not hyperbole. I will bring friends to you now who will bear witness to the tragedy that is me on a basketball court. It's bad. And like, I'm just, it's fascinating to me how the human body can adjust itself, you know, when it's not quote unquote normal. What was your training like when you started in gymnastics, when you started in any of the sports you would do? Obviously, there are other things that have to be at work, and probably you have to work overtime on your body to really get you to a competitive level. How do you go about that?
Yeah, that's a really cool question, actually. And it started actually with, I think, my brothers. So I have three older brothers, and I was like their little experiment, you know. So when they first when they first adopted me, it was like, ooh, what else can she do, you know? So it started out with like, I was really tiny. You have to imagine, I was like a doll basically, and so just jumping from the couch to a pillow on the floor was like a really big jump for me, you know, when I was, I don't know, less than a year old or a year old or whatever. So my brothers would first, you know, try that. And then eventually the pillow was gone. And then eventually it was like the coffee table. And then it was the table, you know, then it was like the kitchen counter. And so it kept, but I loved it. That's the thing.
Right.
So, and then it was like the trampoline, and they would double bounce me. And I would love it, and I would go so high, and we didn't have a net, you know, there was no net on the trampoline then, and all that stuff. So I think that's just when it started. And then with each sport, like softball, basketball, volleyball, there were certain things that I would have to train. I remember serving in volleyball was really hard for me because I was so much shorter. So I had all the power, but I needed the height. So my coach, he was also my art teacher, you know, and he really worked with me and helped me to do like a sideways, like I stood sideways and did it. And people serve a lot of different ways anyway, but for me it was like even more. So he really worked with me. And then in softball, actually, it was really funny. I started in first grade, so I started really little. Right. And at first they're like, they don't know how fast I was going to be running bases. So they said, okay, well, hit the ball to third base to give yourself more time to run to first base. And so that's what I did. You know, I'd always hit it towards third base. But then they saw me looking like a Tasmanian devil, you know, so fast, a whole pile of just dust behind me. And they're like, okay, you don't have to hit the third base anymore. You know, so it was just little things that I would tweak or kind of learn how to be better at that maybe were, you know, in each sport I had to do something a little different. And in volleyball, my strength was not going to be on the net, obviously, you know, but I was so good in the back because when balls drop low and they're really hard for most people to get, I was just perfect. I was fast, I was there, I was strong, I could move, I was already low. So I think it was just really, I mean, that's for anybody though, you know, like this is like just strengthening strengths, strengthening weaknesses, but focusing on the things that you're really good at also. So yeah, it's just, I'm really thankful for the people. Like, I'm never going to be that person that says this was a solo mission and I'm so awesome, because that's just a lie. No way. I'm only where I'm at because of like a million different people who really poured into me and encouraged me and spoke life into me, like that. Totally. I'm a result of that.
Did you have to deal with bullying? I don't want to assume, but it doesn't sound like you really had to deal with it much.
No, actually not at all at school. No, there was only one time I remember a girl did something mean to me, like in kindergarten, and then it was like 5 people immediately like jumped on this person. So it was like, and I like felt bad for the other person, So it was, and I don't think it had anything to do with me not having legs. I think it just was who she was, and kids, and you know what I mean? Like, some kids are just that. But that was the only time I ever remember anything really. And certainly no bullying because of not having legs. It just wasn't, that just wasn't the game plan, I guess, for me. I'm thankful for that.
I love it because it goes along the lines of your book, Everything's Possible. Is that the name of it?
Yep, everything is possible.
Everything is possible. It's a bestseller, everybody. And listen, I mean, of course, everything is possible, and you are a jet setter. Your voice is all over the world. You've traveled the world extensively, telling your story. I'm jealous of you. I told you this when we spoke on the phone. I didn't want my wife to hear about it because she's been on me for years. You need to write a book. You need to be speaking all over. And I'm like, this woman is living my life. She's an athlete. I'm a waste of height. And
stop it.
but I make that. Well, I always joke with people. I say, God works in mysterious ways, because I joked with some of my friends. I say, what's funny? We all used to joke about how bad I was in sports. And yet I performed in every sports arena in the country. And we laugh about that, we just joke about that. But, hey, you get in where you fit in. I really enjoy it. I want to get to that soap opera moment in your life. This is, the cherry on top where, okay, we go back to, let's rewind a little bit. Your childhood idol, athletic idol, instinctively, just for some reason, you're drawn to this young lady. Mm-hmm. And tell me about that. Tell me about what was it about her that appealed to you?
Yeah, as a kid, just we looked alike. She was doing gymnastics, and I loved the sport. And I had just started, like beginner tumbling classes in like first grade. And I knew she was Romanian. She was on Team USA, but I knew she was Romanian, and I knew I was Romanian. And especially growing up, nobody looked like me at all. Like, I was always in the sun. I was brown, like really dark brown, thick, long, super black hair, and just big, all eyes and hair, basically. And so, and just no one looked like that, in my small town. And I always was proud of it, like, oh, I'm Romanian. I felt so cool, Right. And and so it was really awesome to see somebody that looked like me and who's Romanian and who was doing the sport that I love so much. So just as a kid, like a 7-8-year-old, that's why I was drawn to her.
Okay. And I mean, of course, her athleticism was, of course, world class. I mean, Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, that team was deep. It was amazing. I remember watching her in the Olympics, and she was incredible. Mm-hmm. So how do you come to discover that she's not only your athletic idol, and she's not only Romanian like you, but oh my goodness, she's my sister.
And the crowd goes, yeah. Yeah, I know. It's really unbelievable. It just doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't really happen. It's crazy. My friend who was also adopted, she was talking to me one day. We were almost 16, and she had, I don't know why, but she had found out what her biological last name would have been. Mm. I don't know how that came up. I don't remember. And never up until that point, I felt like I had all my answers. I didn't really need anything about my biological family. I was good because my parents were so open about everything that I was like, good. But at that moment, when she found out what her biological last name would have been, I was just kind of like, I wonder what mine would have been. And it was like, I don't know, all of a sudden I wanted to know. So I go home and I ask my mom if there's anything she knew about my biological family that I didn't know, which was like, why am I asking her that? Like, that had to be, that question had to be planted from God, because it made no logical sense. There was no reason why I would ever think that they would hide something like that. They were the literal opposite, like completely the total transparent, you know? And it didn't make any sense. And so I asked her, but I'm like really not expecting an answer, you know? I'm like, whatever. And then she says yes, and I'm like, you don't mean yes. What do you mean yes? You don't know. What are you talking about? You don't know about my biological family. What do you mean? That's not, no. And so then she goes and gets this huge envelope full of papers, puts it on the table, and she's like, well, you're never going to believe this, but your biological last name would have been Mochianu. And I'm like, what? Like, how is it? Because I knew what that meant, because it's such an uncommon last name.
Right.
It was a direct, like, oh, Dominique's my sister? What? You know what I mean? Like, no, really? Like, all the emotions, you know, shock, disbelief, excitement, you know, and then I go on her website, you know, like total stalker mode, and I see all these pictures, and I see that I have another sister, Christina, and her and I are even closer in age, and we look like twins. I mean, it's like uncanny, you know, the resemblance is undeniable. And so then it was like, okay, well, I want to meet them. I figured like a 98% chance that they didn't know about me. I was pretty sure, like, we all as a family were like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that they don't know about you. So my sisters. So it was like one attempt after another. I had a couple of failed attempts over the course of 4 years. And ultimately I was successful at the very end of 2007. Wrote a letter, sent a copy of the adoption papers, pictures, the whole thing, a whole package, so that she knew that I was legit and all that. And then got a letter back from her right before Christmas, talked for the first time on the phone in January 2008, and then me, her, and Christina met May of 2008 altogether. And that was the year, that was exactly within that period of time when my whole acrobatic and aerial career started. So it was like, insane. I mean, my whole life is changing in my career. I'm going from fashion to this whole new thing of like unknown with performing and acrobat and aerial and crazy. And then I'm meeting like this whole new family that I've been waiting for years. And so it was all happening at the same time. It was crazy.
Wow. I love the story she tells about, you know, writing you and letting you know, well, you're going to be an aunt. And you knew then, you know, that she immediately accepted you. Yes. And I mean, I just think that's so beautiful. And also how you all came to this closure rather quickly, that in many respects, the adoption was a gift. You know, because I remember how, you know, I remember there was so much around what was going on in her life. And a lot of those young ladies, on the U.S. gymnastics team. You know, I've spoken to one in particular who's in our profession, Shania Booth, and she told me about a lot of the really tumultuous things a lot of those young ladies went through that, you know, none of us knew because they were just these glamorous athletes. And you think they have it all. And, you know, that's another thing. It's so interesting, right? You know, people see you who aren't in your immediate community, aren't in your family. And so they don't know your full humanity. And so they make assumptions. But it's amazing how we do it with the famous. We do it with celebrities. We just make these assumptions that, you know, oh, they have it all. They have all this glamour and attention and money, endorsements, what have you. And to hear her be so candid about, you know, how hard her life really was. And it would have probably been, you know, just a tremendous road for you to try to live through, you know, had they kept you. I mean, and so you look at that, it's like, wow, what a fascinating gift. And now to see where you are using your life really as a ministry that is global and really dynamic, and you're bringing that talent now to, this wonderful project, Omnium, Bold New Circus, which I have to tell you, I'm honored that I'm on the same bill as you. I've followed you somewhat, over the years. I was fascinated with your story when I first heard about it, and to be on the same bill, at least virtually. I look forward to when we're under the big tent together.
Oh yeah.
Wait, that will be really a marvelous thing. But wow, I mean, how did you come to meet Lisa B. Lewis, and what did you think when she approached you with this vision?
Yeah. Well, she kind of sent the deck out, in an email, and just I was seeing the breakdown of the concept, and I was still over in Austria with my husband, and so everything was still a bit like, yeah, when I get back to my real life, and kind of was at a distance, literally. But I was so impressed with the detail, with the concept, and it was just so, I'm like, yeah, of course we need this. This is great. This is really, really for everybody, like it's totally for family, and like every family, it's for all the families. And for me, of course, I just know how that is, going somewhere and you never know what it's going to be like when you get there. Am I going to have to should I wear a nice dress, or am I going to have to get out and walk up the stairs because there's no ramp, or because there's no, like these stupid things, which I mean, I can also, by the way, just get out and do that, but that's also not everybody's reality either. Right. That's just like one example of one type of thing. But that's something that I always have to think about, when I go to places like that. And so how awesome that someone can just go there freely and not have to think about these things. Right. Which it should be like that, because especially for something that's a family thing and a beautiful kind of event that everyone can just go together. And it's so awesome, circus and performing, and just from on the stage to in the seats, the whole concept, I was like, yes, I want to be part of this. And at first she was just, asking me to be on the board. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's super cool. And then I was like, well, I think I want to perform a little bit. And then then I didn't even say anything. She was like, of course I would want you to perform also if you'd be open to it,
That was the seduction.
Like, yeah. Yes, of course I want to perform. So, and then as it's just, gone on, and I've met more people like yourself, and just kind of, it's so cool. Like, I'm really biting at the bit to like perform in real life. I'm so,
absolutely.
So ready.
Absolutely. And I love the whole concept, not merely because, of course, representation matters, but I think it matters in the sense that it invites all of us to step into the reality of other people, not like ourselves. It invites us to actually, recognize, oh, some people may need certain accommodations, or, wow, look at what this person actually overcomes to do that thing. I mean, I think it's a great concept. And I think it's a wonderful, not only a bold new circus, but I think it's a glorious new chapter in circus. And Lord knows, as a society, we need something that is so unifying, and it's attempting to bring so many people together and recognize so many people who often go, ignored in a lot of the political conversations that are out there. I think doing it through art is so wonderful, and I just can't wait for people to see it. I know we have our virtual debut December 12th, but again, we are crossing our fingers and lighting our candles and praying for that time where we'll be able to present this under the big top. Jen Bricker, you really are magical. You're something else. I'm not gonna give you that cornball. Oh, you're such an inspiration, but you are. You're such an inspiration. I mean, I talk to somebody like you, and I'm like, I can't come up with any excuses for whatever I'm trying to do in my life now. I think you're wonderful, and I really, really am over the moon. I'm a fan for life. Thank you for stopping by in Center Ring.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You are awesome, and I'm happy to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, she is the high-flying wonder, Jen Bricker-Bauer. I like that.
The black experience in circuses go back hundreds of years, and we do it with our own style. The circus has been a microcosm of the outside world. Many of the same prejudices that you see in the outside world are present in the circus.
So it's moving past the vision or the limited vision that the society has for you and stepping into the talent and skill that you know you have to go forward as a performer.
The circus is a vast international community, and there's only one place to connect for jobs, events, the latest news, and so much more. circustalk.com. Join today.